Money, 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 money. Money, 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 money. Money. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie Tee? Welcome to the 79th installment of the Louie Tee Network Podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie Tee. Thank you for joining me. A lot to get to today, including a lot of guys making some money. All right, and we'll start there as the NFL handed out some contracts today as the two best tight ends in the league got paid today. We start with George Kittle, who I perceived to be the best tight end in all of the National Football League, getting his just due. I've been on the George Kittle trade for quite some time now. I remember, go check the archives, in his second season in the league, I had actually done a podcast episode in a segment entitled The 23rd Chamber, where I unlocked some of the deepest and darkest secrets in the National Football League. And I unearthed George Kittle on that episode, telling anybody that would listen, hey, this guy is legit and you should know his name because he's going to blow. And he's done nothing but blossom since then into the league's best tight end, best combo tight end, blocking and receiving. Now that Gronk's out of the way, this guy's taking over the mantle, and he just has so much fun playing the game. He's a great soundbite. I love George Kittle's game and everything that he brings to the table, and he was well deserving of this deal. Now, I did not expect, however, this deal to be as lucrative as it was. 5 years, $75 million for George Kittle. And of course, it's the richest deal ever handed out to a tight end in NFL history. However, that's nothing because everybody gets the richest deal in NFL history nowadays. If you're next in line, that's usually what you're going to get. However, it's how far ahead of the rest of the field he is in terms of money that was surprising to me. Hunter Henry is on a franchise tag with the Los Angeles Chargers. He was making the most money per annual basis. Obviously, it's a one-year franchise tag. However, it was 1 year about north of $10 million. So let's call it 10 and a half, somewhere in that neighborhood. And George Kittle is now going to get 15 per annual in his contract with the 49ers. His guaranteed money blows everybody else's at the tight end position guaranteed money out of the water. He's getting $40 million guaranteed. 30 of it he's going to get tomorrow, which is asinine as well. But his contract numbers are staggering, and the way he's leaped the field. And I told you guys this last offseason. I said, sign your tight ends now because Kelsey and George Kittle are going to reset the market in a major way, and you're going to have to pay more money if you don't do it sooner rather than later. And they did it in a big way. Speaking of which, Travis Kelce, not even an hour after Kittle received his deal, he then turns around and gets a 4-year, $57 million extension. Now, I knew his money wasn't going to be greater than that of George Kittle. And I even said as much on my IG post that his money wasn't going to exceed Kittle's. Here's why. Travis Kelce is now on his third deal. A lot of you don't realize that. Back in 2014, he signed a 6-year, $46 million extension after that rookie deal was about to expire. So this is his third contract in the league. It doesn't seem like he's been in the league that long, but Travis Kelce has been in the league for quite some time. So he's going to finish his career now as a Kansas City Chief with this 4-year, $57 million deal. And the Chiefs have been handing out bread this offseason, locking up a lot of their integral pieces of their puzzle. We know about Chris Jones, who was on the franchise tag initially, getting a massive deal to stay in Kansas City for the foreseeable future. We saw the deal that Patrick Mahomes got, richest contract in American sports history, over $5 million for his contract. And then, of course, now Travis Kelce being locked up for the foreseeable future. They still got one more to go with Tyreek Hill, but this is a massive deal here for Kelce. It keeps him in Kansas City probably for the duration of his career. And remember, he had 2 years left on his deal. So what this amounts to is now a 6-year deal. So that's probably all she wrote in terms of Travis Kelce in the league going anywhere else. So that's a good move and a good look for the Chiefs as they, put some respect on their name, the Super Bowl defending Kansas City Chiefs. So great move by them. Also, Buffalo Bills said, let us get in the mix. We got a guy that we want to lock up in left tackle Dion Dawkins. So they spread the love to their big man, giving him a 4-year, $60 million extension to remain the blindside protector of one Josh Allen. Dion Dawkins came out of Temple as a guy that they thought could help them maybe on the right side of the offensive line. They already had Cordy Glenn at the time. Glenn had some issues with health. They ultimately moved him to Cincinnati, wound up giving Dion Dawkins an opportunity very early in his NFL career to start at left tackle, and he hasn't looked back since, and he was rewarded with a massive deal to keep him as a Buffalo Bill for the foreseeable future. And then the deal that got the entire day kicked off was a very surprising one, a quiet one, but nonetheless a potentially impactful one. Everson Griffin signs a 1-year, $6 million deal with the Dallas Cowboys. This one came out of nowhere because we weren't looking at Everson Griffin in Dallas. He had been rumored to potentially go back to Minnesota. Mike Zimmer made it abundantly clear he'd like to have Everson Griffin back in Minnesota, the only place he's ever known and called home in this league. Also, the Seattle Seahawks were sniffing around amongst other teams, and they could definitely use some help. I even mentioned that on the Jamal Adams trade video, that for all of the work that they've done on that defense, in the first-round pick that they added Jordan Brooks at the linebacker position and adding in Jamal Adams in the secondary, they still need help up front getting after the quarterback. So that would have made a ton of sense, even though Everson Griffin at his ripe old age at 32 can still get it done. It would have made a ton of sense, especially if you're able to control the amount of snaps you have him in the game. But he ends up signing with Dallas, and they weren't even on the radar. No one had ever reported that the Cowboys were interested. They did this very quietly, and now they've fortified what has become a very prolific defensive line. Don Terry Poe was signed in the offseason. So was Gerald McCoy to go along with Tank Lawrence and now Everson Griffin on the other line. That's a very formidable front four for the Dallas Cowboys, who now have not only a dominant offense, but potentially a dominant, once again, defense to go along with that group after adding a tag team partner opposite of Tank Lawrence in Everson Griffin. Remember, last year they had the medicine man Quinn go off, and he got a massive deal to go out to Chicago. So they had to replace him. They do it with Everson Griffin on a 1-year, $6 million deal. Really good move and good look for all parties involved there. So before we jump into the gym dropping session today, I want to go back to yesterday's gym dropping session, because I told you guys that this is going to be unlike any NFL season we've ever seen. And I said, stop bitching. I don't want to hear it. Don't bitch, because there are going to be unfair advantages gained by the opposition on a weekly basis, because you may have 5 or 6 players, key players, out due to COVID-19. There may be a forfeit or two throughout the season for some team out there because of COVID-19. These are things that you're going to have to accept if you want a season in 2020. And if you're not willing to accept and compromise and understand that those things potentially come with the territory of a season, then you need to get out right now. And this, to me, is the greatest example of why I said what I said yesterday. Remember, I told you, I'm not worried about the 7-year vet going into I'm not worried about the 30-year-old veteran going into his 7th year in the league that's married with 2 kids at home. I'm not worried about the newlywed that's 28 years old with a baby on the way going home and taking care of himself and his family. I'm not worried about those guys. I'm not worried about the guys with families at home. I'm worried about the guys who are 25, second year in the league, who's 23 as a rookie, that wants to go out, and they're single, and they want to go out and they want to have a good time and enjoy the spoils of being an NFL baller. Those are the guys I'm worried about. And the Seattle Seahawks had to release a rookie today because he broke protocol by trying to sneak in a piece of ass through the side door at the team hotel. And they caught it on film and on camera. And he even had the audacity and even went to the lengths of having her dress in Seattle Seahawks garb in all of their regalia so that she could pass off as a member of the organization. Really, dude? You wanted a piece of ass that bad that you thought you needed to do that? You couldn't wait. And that's what I'm talking about. Guys are impulsive at that age. And look, this is when he's in a controlled environment. What do you think someone like him is going to do when he's sent off on his own and said, hey, follow protocol, have respect for your fellow man in the locker room and do right by them? That's not going to be enough. You can preach this all you want, but there are just going to be some guys that aren't going to listen. So I thought that was a great story, funny as hell, but also it's an indictment on what's probably to come and why this season, I think, won't find its conclusion when it's all said and done. But I digress. Let's get to our gem dropping session for today. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie Tee. Let me get you up, get you thinking a little bit. All right, let me open you up, get you thinking a little bit. So today's gem dropping session, I'm gonna make this nice and brief. So I was very naive, and I can be naive at times when it comes to certain things. And in this particular instance, I was very naive. I thought that players weren't going to opt out of the NFL season. And, you know, the ones with underlying health issues, I understand, I get it. And, you know, I have no gripe. I don't have a gripe with anybody, whether you have underlying health issues or not, opting out. If you choose to choose health, and because we don't know everything about COVID-19, we don't know about the lasting effects of this infection. We don't know how this is going to affect you 30 years down the road. Does this actually scar your lungs for life? Like, is this going to hurt you 25 years? We don't know. And if you have anxiety over that, if you are extremely careful and don't want to risk it, I get it. I understand. But I didn't anticipate this many guys saying, you know what, not worth my time. I'm just going to pass. And yeah, there are stipends for players, $150,000 if you don't have underlying health issues that you will have to pay back. And essentially, it's an advance if you don't have any underlying health issues and you're just deciding to sit out. It'll come out of a future salary. But $300,000 for those who do have underlying health issues or family members that have underlying health issues, and you don't have to pay it back. Either way, I just was taken aback. So I'll make this quick. I just want to go through the list of some guys, and almost 80 guys decided to opt out. I'm not going to go through the entire list, just some notable names of players who decided to opt out of the season. And I simply was shocked at so many guys, and I don't think it's done. I think even though the opt-out period has come and gone, I think you may ultimately see more guys, especially as players start to become infected. You may see some guys decide, you know what, I'm out of here. And we'll see. You know, I don't think the CBA makes it very easy for someone to decide that they want out, but I don't think we've seen the last of this either. But as we go through this list quickly, Star Lotulelei of the Buffalo Bills, their big-time defensive tackle, decided to opt out. Carolina Panthers second-year player Christian Miller out of Alabama decided to opt out. And you got a new coaching staff. They want to see what they have. And, you know, he decided, I'm going to opt out. Isaiah Prince, offensive tackle of the Cincinnati Bengals, they could use as many bodies up front, as much depth as possible on their offensive line. He decided to opt out. Big-time defensive tackle, one of the better defensive tackles in all of the National Football League, Eddie Goldman of the Chicago Bears, deciding to opt out. The Cleveland Browns had 5 guys decide to opt out. That's a high number for a team in the league. The most notable name here is Andrew Billings, the former 3rd round selection of the Cleveland Browns, who is now a former Cincinnati Bengals 3rd round selection that's now a Cleveland Brown, looking to resurrect his career in the state of Ohio in the same division. He's opting out, and he's among 5 Browns choosing to do so. Jawan James was a massive free agent acquisition for the Denver Broncos just an offseason ago as a right tackle, and they need all the help they can get up front along the offensive line. He's opting out, so that's a big problem for the Denver Broncos there. As you go to the Detroit Lions, they've got 3 guys opting out. The most notable name here is Geronimo Allison. from the Green Bay Packers. So they go snatch a guy away from a rival within the division, thinking he's going to help, and he opts out of the season. Again, I don't have any issues with that, but that was a big acquisition for them, and he is not going to play in 2020. And speaking of the Green Bay Packers losing a wide receiver, they added Devin Funchess to take the place of a Geronimo Allison, only to then have Devin Funchess decide to opt out. And remember, keep in mind, the Packers did nothing. They were heavily criticized by me and a lot of other people for not addressing the wide receiver position via the draft. They thought Devin Funchess was going to come in and help. That's not going to be the case, at least not in 2020. You keep going through the list. The Chiefs had 3 guys opt out, all of them big time names. Lucas Niang was their 3rd round selection from this past year's draft, was going to come in and help try to fortify that offensive line. A big time prospect out of TCU, not going to play in the upcoming season. Laurent Duvernay Tardif, one of my favorite names in the National Football League. He's also a doctor. So he felt like his time and efforts could be better spent helping people than playing in this upcoming season. Can't knock the hustle there. He's opting out. But Damian Williams was the name that garnered some of the most attention of any player in the league to opt out, because he wasn't doing it for any medical reasons other than he's just worried about himself. Not really sure what COVID-19 is and what it does to you, but he does know he doesn't want to get it, and so he decided to opt out. A lot of people were very critical of Damian Williams. That's his right to opt out, and so 3 Chiefs, all impactful names, opting out of the season. As we continue through this list, the Dolphins had 2 wide receivers, not 1, but 2 wide receivers opt out of the 2020 season, which prompted them to go out and sign Chester Rogers to try to give them some more depth at receiver. But both Allen Hurns and Albert Wilson both decided to opt out due to COVID-19. So that was, those were 2 big losses for the Dolphins. The Minnesota Vikings spent a lot of money in free agency on defensive tackle Michael Pierce from the Baltimore Ravens, only to have him opt out of the upcoming season. So that was a loss for the Minnesota Vikings. And then the New England Patriots were the ones that took the cake. They had 7 players in total opt out of the 2020 season, by far the most of any team in the league. And so it doesn't surprise me, or excuse me, they're up to 8 now. And it doesn't surprise me that they had the most players opt out. To me, when I first learned of the Patriots having players opt out, you know what I said to myself? I said, if there was a team out there that would have players opt out, wouldn't you think it would be the team that we've deemed to be the smartest in the league? The team that's outsmarting the opposition week after week? They would have players that would actually think, really sit down and think about this hard and give it some serious consideration, and then do the thing that a lot of people think is the smart thing, and that's to opt out of the season. So, you know, Patrick Chung is a big-time player in that secondary for the Patriots. Marquise Lee was an acquisition this offseason to give them a weapon to bolster that receiving core. Donta Hightower is probably the biggest name to opt out of any team in the league. This is their best linebacker. He's their star linebacker. He's not going to play in the upcoming season, along with a bunch of other guys, including Marcus Cannon, along the offensive line. As you continue through the list, the New York Giants have Nate Solder, their left tackle, their starting left tackle, opt out. He's got underlying health issues. He himself is a cancer survivor. His son has cancer. So there are a number of reasons why he's opting out. We totally understand all of them and then some. But the guy that I'm interested in here is Sam Beale, the former supplemental draft pick by the Giants that a lot of Giants fans were anxious to see. Guess they're going to have to wait another year before they get to see Sam Beale on the football field, as he decided to opt out of the upcoming season. CJ Mosley, another massive name in New York, opting out this time from the Jets. he's deciding to sit this one out with COVID-19, as well as Josh Doctson, which is a interesting one because here's a guy that's potentially on his last legs in the league. He's been on a number of teams in a short period of time after being a first-round pick of the Washington football team some 3-4 years ago. Hasn't worked out, was with the Minnesota Vikings last year. That didn't work out. Now he's with the Jets. This could have been his last opportunity. Maybe he still gets a chance with the Jets next year when things get back to normal. Maybe the Jets find a guy to take his place that plays well this year, and Josh Doctson never sets foot in a Jets facility, and for that matter, never sets foot in another NFL locker room again. We'll see, but you would think a guy like Doctson would be really looking forward to another opportunity, but maybe he has underlying health issues. Maybe someone he loves close to him has underlying health issues, or maybe, as I've stated a bunch of times, maybe he just doesn't really care about football all that much. That's not for me to decide. He's opting out as well. Marquise Goodwin, wide receiver of the Philadelphia Eagles, who they traded for this offseason, going to opt out of the season. They were looking to add more speed to their football team. He decided to opt out, so that didn't go the way they planned. Travis Benjamin, another guy with speed for the San Francisco 49ers, opting out of the season. Chance Warmack, guard for the Seattle Seahawks, opting out of the season. And Larry Warford is a big-time free agent name out there floating around after being a surprising release. And a lot of people kind of predicted it after the Saints went after Cesar Ruiz in the first round of the draft this year, that Larry Warford would then become expendable after spending high draft picks on interior offensive linemen 2 years consecutively. It seemed like the writing was on the wall for Larry Warford to be released, and he was. Big time acquisition, or a big time free agent out there floating around. He decided he's going to sit this thing out with COVID-19 lingering, and so he, even though he's not on an NFL roster, is also deciding to opt out of the 2020 season. I said all of that to say this. I was just taken aback by how many players decided to opt out. I didn't think this many guys was going to decide to sit out, especially ones with no underlying health issues. I just thought everyone was going to sign up and play. And, there are a lot of people, that have to get up and go to work every day. And I know the people that are saying that, hey, I got to get up, go to work every day. I got family members at home that I don't want infected, but I got to go out. I got to make a living. I got to earn, and I got to be able to provide for my family. And I'm at risk every single day, and I'm not making millions of dollars. I understand that point as well, but everyone has their own prerogative. These guys have theirs, and it's their right to be able to say, no, I'm not going to risk my well-being or those around me that I love, and I'm going to sit out this season. I just didn't think it would be this many of them deciding to do it. So that's the gem dropping session for today. Let's now transition into our next segment. And so we're going to talk about the draft, first round from this past spring. We are going to pick up where we left off yesterday. Remember, yesterday we went through the first 11 selections of the first round of the 2020 NFL draft, talked about where these players are. Remember, we had no OTAs, no minis, none of the things that we usually get as a refresher as to where all these rookies ended up. So I thought I'd do my part to help you remember where some of these guys ended up. And so we'll pick up where we left off at yesterday, which was the 11th pick. We'll start today with the 12th pick in the draft, which belonged to the Las Vegas Raiders. Remember, get used to saying the Las Vegas Raiders. They had two selections in the first round. We'll get to their second one a little bit later on in today's show. But the first of which was wide receiver out of Alabama, Henry Ruggs III. The first receiver, coincidentally enough, taken off the board in this year's draft. To the surprise of many, I thought there was a chance he could go as the first receiver in the draft because of his blazing speed. We've seen speed warp the thought process of decision makers before. You don't have to go back that far. Just go back to the John Ross draft some years ago, where the Bengals took John Ross over some other guys that were thought to be better, including Corey Davis in that particular draft, because he ran that blazing 40 at the combine. Hasn't lived up to the hype because he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but speed has been known to do that. However, this guy is different. He's much better to me as a football player. He's not just a speed demon. He's the guy that can actually play the receiver position, is Henry Ruggs III. I've said this on numerous occasions. he's the closest thing I've seen to Tyreek Hill since Hill has entered this league. And so to me, this is a tremendous drafting draft pick by the Las Vegas Raiders. And to me, this is all John Gruden's doing here. I'll tell you why a little bit later and why I feel that way. But this is a tremendous vertical threat for them in a division where speed is imperative. Whether you have it on defense or offense, you got to have it in this particular division. If you're trying to keep up with the Chiefs, you better be able to score points. And the Raiders, they really found themselves in quite the quandary last year with Antonio Brown's situation, because they went out and got AB with the thought process that he was going to be their vertical threat. He was going to be their do-everything wide receiver. And remember, they went out and signed Tyrell Williams last offseason to be a number 2 wide receiver, not a number 1. And when the Antonio Brown saga unfolded and they had to release him, it forced everyone to go up a notch. It took everybody out of their comfort zone. And I talk about how a number 1 wide receiver can properly slot everyone where they're supposed to go. And when you don't have a number 1 wide receiver, everyone is then knocked off kilter. So Tyrell Williams, who was signed to be a number 2, was then looked upon as a number 1 option. That's not who he is. And so a guy that they drafted last year in the 5th round, Hunter Renfrow out of Clemson, was looked upon as a great slot option, as a 3rd option to get the football to. He was now looked upon as a number 2 wide receiver, not why they drafted him. So everything was knocked off kilter by adding in a Henry Ruggs. Now you hopefully re-slot everybody where they're supposed to be. Tyrell Williams can now be that number 2 that you signed him to be. Hunter Renfrow can now be that slot option as a 3rd option that you drafted him to be. And now with the emergence of Darren Waller at the tight end position, who you had to throw it to out of necessity last season, now he comes in and maybe he's an afterthought with all the speed that you can put on the field now, because remember, Tyrell Williams can run as well. So this is a big move for the Raiders. Gives Derek Carr the weapon that he needs, and more importantly, John Gruden the weapon that he so desires. Remember, he likes throwing the football vertically to speedsters. Go see Joey Galloway in Tampa Bay once upon a time. So this makes a ton of sense. First receiver off the board in a division where speed is, to me, imperative. The Raiders get their guy at number 12 in Henry Ruggs III. You get to number 13. It's where we saw our first trade of this draft. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers just coming up a mere spot, but it was a very necessary spot to ensure that they got their guy, the final of the big 4 tackles in this draft, Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa. Buccaneers solidify their offensive line. They moved on from DeMar Dotson in the offseason, needed to get themselves a tackle. And the thought process here was, well, what position is he going to play? Is he going to play left or right tackle? A lot of people were thinking, well, now maybe Donovan Smith is expendable. Nope, just gave him a contract not too long ago, making a ton of money. Don't see Donovan Smith going anywhere. He's at left tackle. Tristan Wirfs, who was a right tackle at Iowa anyhow, going to slide right into that right tackle position to protect Tom Brady. We'll see how that goes. Very raw, but has everything you're looking for, including some Trent Williams, Jason Peters-esque type athleticism to go with a wrestling and a shot put background. This guy is an athletic freak, and he's just scratching the surface. He's very raw, has a long way to go, but he's got everything that you're looking for. And so we'll see if the Buccaneers can develop him and maybe feel like they got themselves a steal as the 4th tackle off the board. And the last of the big 4 is taken here at 13 by the Buccaneers in Tristan Wirfs. You look at number 14, the 49ers gladly moved back 1 spot, picked up additional picks in a draft where they didn't have a lot of draft ammunition to begin with. They did, however, have 2 first-round picks. Why did they have an additional first-round pick? Because they traded away one of the dominant defensive tackles in this league, DeForest Buckner, to the Indianapolis Colts this offseason, leaving a void up front along their defensive line. How do they fill that void? Easily at number 14 with a guy that they were going to take at 13 had they stayed at 13 in Javon Kinlaw. So to move back a spot, acquire more picks, and still get the guy that you were going to take all along is a win for me any day of the week. And Javon Kinlaw has the potential to be a stud at the next level. Going to have to stay healthy. Had hip surgery in the offseason, but this is a guy that has all the makings of being a disruptor at the next level. Is he a true pass rushing threat? We're going to see. He has the length, he has the quickness, he has the power, and everything that you look for in a dominant defensive interior tackle. But can he put it all together is the real question. He fits right into the San Francisco 49ers mold of a defensive lineman. Remember, Eric Armstead, 6'7", 6'6", 6'7", Defoe, 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", right in that same height and length range. And so he fits right in at 6'6", 6'5", 6'6", 320 pounds or so. So this makes a ton of sense. Out with the old, in with the new. They couldn't afford both of those big-time defensive tackles. Armstead was up first, so they pay him the big money, trade away Defoe, and they still get a guy to replace him. It's brilliance on the part of John Lynch and company at 14 for the San Francisco 49ers, getting Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina. You get to 15. Staying in the AFC West, as we talked about with the Raiders at 12, and staying at Alabama and at the receiver position, the Denver Broncos elect to select Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver out of Alabama. Speed, more of it for this Denver Broncos football team. Now, look, the Broncos didn't know that when they made the selection of Jeudy, they would then have an opportunity to double back and double down on speed and get another absolute burner in KJ Hamler just a round later. So they felt like we already got a guy in Cortland Sutton who has emerged as a premier wide receiver in this league, can go up and get the football at its highest point, can also make acrobatic catches, can work the perimeter, but also work the middle of the football field, do all of the dirty work. But we don't have a true deep threat, a guy that can take the top off the defense. Enter in Jerry Jeudy. Now you got two of them with KJ Hamler, but they didn't know Hamler was going to be on the board in the second round at the time of their selection. So they did the smart thing. They take Jerry Jeudy. A lot of people thought he would be not only the first Bama receiver off the board, but potentially the first receiver off the board in this draft as a whole. He turned out to not only be the second receiver, but the second Bama receiver off the board. But that's nor here nor there. Broncos get their man, and he's not just a deep threat. As I mentioned with Henry Ruggs, he's a guy that can work all levels of the football field. And another thing that Jerry Jeudy also brings to the table is he's an elite route runner. There were some concentration drops on film with Jerry Jeudy, but when you get past those, and there weren't many of them, let me start by saying that, but when you get past those and you start peeling back the layers, he might have been the most polished and ready to go wide receiver in this draft. Again, reminds me a lot of Calvin Ridley, who came out of that Alabama program. And so if you're the Broncos, if you're the Raiders, you're trying to keep up with the Chiefs, you want to score a bunch of points, this is the way to do it, by adding team speed. The Broncos added a bunch of it. Remember, they already had Noah Fant on that football team, who's a sub 4.5 40 guy at the tight end position. Now you add in a 4.3 blazer in Jeudy and another one in Hamler, and now you've got arguably the fastest team offensively in the National Football League. And so it'll be interesting to see what Drew Lock is able to do in year two with all the weaponry that he's been provided in this upcoming season. But they've got to protect Drew Lock. And now with the news of their right tackle, Juwan James, opting out, they already had issues up front. They have a very questionable left tackle as it is in Garrett Bowles. It'll be interesting to see if they can keep Drew Lock upright and give him the time necessary to get the football to all of these targets. But we move on to the number 16 pick in the draft that belonged to the Atlanta Falcons. They select Clemson cornerback AJ Terrell with their selection. And this is a guy that some people thought wasn't worthy of the 16th selection. I know a lot of Atlanta Falcons fans didn't think they would take a cornerback here. Remember, I had the Falcons trading up to 9 to get CJ Henderson, and they elected to stand pat at 16 and take a cornerback there. So a lot of Falcons fans were wrong about them not potentially looking to go corner after moving on from Desmond Trufant in the offseason. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that a lot of people want to talk about the national championship game, and he got baptized and blessed by Jamar Chase. I don't like talking about minors, but that's a grown man right there. He may be a minor, and I don't like talking about minors, but Jamar Chase is a grown man. Look, a lot of people got baptized by Jamar Chase in 2019, so he shouldn't feel bad. But the thing that I loved about AJ Terrell in that game was that his mental toughness was what really drew me to him in that game, is that he didn't back down. Yeah, he got his ass whooped. He got tossed around like a rag doll. He got beat, but he didn't back down. He was there. And some of those were some well-thrown footballs too. When he was in coverage and in phase, he just can't defend a perfect pass. But at the end of the day, AJ Terrell is a guy that has some things to clean up. He doesn't necessarily have the best top end speed, and he's got the height, the length. He can run, but he's just not a blazer. But again, you don't have to be a blazer in this league if you understand leverage, you understand the cornerback position, and they put you in positions to succeed. And we'll see if he can put everything together. I like AJ Terrell. I like his competitive spirit, and I think he's got everything you're looking for to be a number one cornerback in this league. And so I like the pick. He was my number 3 corner in this draft, and I think the Falcons did the right thing by getting the corner. If they weren't going to take the edge rusher here, and I know they signed Dante Fowler Jr., but what's better than 1? 2. They could have drafted another edge rusher here, but they elected to go with the cornerback position. I don't have a problem with it, with them selecting AJ Terrell. You get to number 17 in this draft, and this was a no-brainer here. It's the Dallas Cowboys, America's team, Jersey boys, taking wide receiver out of Oklahoma, CeeDee Lamb. He had no business being here. The Cowboys felt like it was their duty to turn in the card with CeeDee Lamb's name on it at this point. And I've always talked about specific teams just doing a hell of a job drafting, and that they've got a ton of talent. Now, what they do with that talent once they get there is totally on them. But I talk about Cincinnati, I talk about Jacksonville, I talk about this Dallas Cowboys team as teams that routinely get the draft right. They just know how to do it at a high level, and they get talented football players. The Cowboys didn't need CeeDee Lamb. This is overkill here, but he was the best player available and the best bang for their buck at this particular selection. And that's what the draft is all about. Getting the most bang for your buck. Getting the most out of your selection, the most value, squeezing every ounce of value out of your picks, especially in the first 2 rounds. And you can't get more value than CeeDee Lamb at 17 if you're the Dallas Cowboys. They had 2,000-yard receivers last year in Michael Gallup, and of course, when the ball's in the sky and your QB needs a guy, it's Amari Cooper. So they didn't need another 1,000-yard receiver potentially in CeeDee Lamb, but that's what they just got. Not to mention, they got a young and up-and-coming tight end that I really like. They've got a perennial 1,000-yard, 1,200-yard back in Ezekiel Elliott. This offense is ready to go right out of the packaging. And I talked about the defensive line already with the acquisition of Everson Griffin. This is the most talented football team in the NFC side of the bracket. Now, you could argue that this is the most talented football team in the entire league, and I'd definitely be willing to make that argument that they're top 2 in this league. If you want to look at another team like a Baltimore, maybe a Kansas City that has a ton of talent as well, but come on, you're not going to find a team stocked with more talent than this Dallas Cowboys football team. Ridiculous talent at linebacker, along the defensive line with all the acquisitions. At receiver, they're just ridiculously loaded. They've got the best receiving core in football right now as it stands. You add Zeke Elliott into the mix, and he can catch it out of the backfield too. They're just an abundance of riches. This was a no-brainer, and this was overkill. And so look out for the Dallas Cowboys. They have a Super Bowl-ready roster right now. And it wouldn't shock me if they went 13-2 and they represented the NFC in the NFC Championship game this season. It wouldn't shock me. Now, we'll see what Mike McCarthy does. I'm not a huge Mike McCarthy fan. We'll see if he's able to extract all of the talent out of this football team and all the potential and turn it into wins. But the talent is here. There's no mistaking it. And adding a guy like CeeDee Lamb to the mix is a prime example of why the Cowboys do it among the best in the league in the draft. You get to 18. It was my first real disappointment of the draft, and that was Austin Jackson going 18th overall to the Miami Dolphins. Their second of 3 picks in the first round. Look, I praised and lauded the Dolphins for taking Tua Tagovailoa 5th overall, and so I understand the concept of then wanting to come back and get the guy to protect him at 18, but you probably could have waited. And, I can't say that. I can't say that definitively and know that at 27 or 30 or wherever their last pick of the first round was, that this guy would still be available. But there's a stark drop-off from Tristan Wirfs to Austin Jackson. Now, let me say this. A lot of people have been making excuses for Austin Jackson, talking about his bone marrow transplant that he had to his sister, which is an admirable feat there. Got to give him credit for that he gave to his sister. But that surgery was so close to the start of the college football season, and yet this guy didn't miss a single game. And to his credit, he played and he said, look, I didn't heal enough and I wasn't right all season long, but I didn't complain. I just went out and I competed, and he got beaten. He looked bad at times and I penalized him for that. So I do want to take this time to say that if that's why he struggled, because when you go back and watch him in previous years, he looked a lot better and he's got some talent. He's got length. He's got athleticism. He's got the size. He's got everything you're looking for. He just struggled in 2019 too much to the point that I just was turned off by the tape. And maybe the Dolphins got the right man. Maybe they got a good football player here. But I went off the 2019 tape, and I'm a Janet Jackson guy. What have you done for me lately? Doom, 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 doom. Ooh, yeah. And what I saw in 2019 was a guy that didn't do enough for me to warrant the 18th pick in the draft. But we will see the Dolphins get their man at 18 in Austin Jackson, USC tackle. Hopefully he pans out for them and provides Tua Tagovailoa with the protection that he needs up front. We get to number 19 overall, and this was another surprise, back-to-back surprises in Damon Arnett, the cornerback from the Ohio State University, going to the Las Vegas Raiders with their second pick in the first round. And remember, I told you that the first pick of Henry Ruggs III was strictly a John Gruden pick? Well, this was a Michael Mayock pick here. And the way I look at this is they came to a conclusion. You're the head man in charge, so you get the first one. You take the first one. Whatever guy you want, you take him. Gruden said, well, I want speed on offense. Gruden's an offensive guy. I want a speed demon. I want a guy that can go get it, can stretch the football field vertically. I want Henry Ruggs. And Mayock said, I wouldn't take him, but that's your guy. I love him as a football player. Take him. And then Gruden said, okay, I had the first one. You take the second one. He's all yours. Who do you want to select? And Mayock said, I want the guy with toughness. I want the guy with grit. I want a guy that's a competitor, a badass competitor. I want Damon Arnett. And Gruden said, okay, I wouldn't have done that, but okay, cool. That's your pick. I don't have anything to do with it. And this is a Michael Mayock pick all day long, twice on Sundays. I saw this one when it was made. I didn't love it, but I don't hate it. Here's why. I didn't have Damon Arnett as a first round pick. He was a second round pick, but he was solidly a second round pick. Now remember, in this draft, there were two corners, and then there was a start drop off, and then everybody had, corners 3 through 10 kind of just jumbled up everywhere and mixed and matched. And you could have talked to somebody that had Damon Arnett as a first round pick. You could have talked to somebody that had Damon Arnett as a third round pick. I had him as a second round pick. Here's the thing. He suffers from what I affectionately have termed the other corner syndrome. All right. And I love it. I love when corners come into the league with the other cornerback syndrome. All right. Once upon a time, Marshawn Lattimore was the guy at Ohio State, and the guy opposite of him, the other corner, was Garyon Conley, coincidentally enough, the Oakland Raiders first round pick a few years back. But he suffered from the other cornerback syndrome. And I loved Garyon Conley because of it. It makes you more of a competitor, because the other teams around college football are trying so desperately to throw away from the guy that's opposite of you, because he's viewed as a first round corner, as Jeffrey Okudah was. And so you're getting all the work is Damon Arnett. And he stood up to the challenge week in, week out. And he did it with a broken hand primarily the entire season in 2019 for Ohio State. Had a cast on for much of the season. So I think that also endeared himself to Michael Mayock as he showed off toughness there. I wouldn't have selected him at 19. Again, I don't hate this pick. I don't love it, but I understand the rationale behind it. You couple him with Trayvon Mullins, who they took last year out of Clemson, and maybe you have a formidable duo now at the cornerback position if you are the Las Vegas Raiders. At 20 K'Lavon Chaisson of the national championship LSU Tigers comes off the board to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Remember, I talked about Cincinnati killing it in the draft every year. I talk about Dallas killing it every year in the draft. And I also talk about Jacksonville killing it. And this is why. They kill it here at 20. K'Lavon Chaisson had no business being here. He could have come off the board as early as 16. I thought that's where 15 easily could have been at Denver. They could have been looking for some help for Von Miller off the edge. But I thought 16 to Atlanta was where he really could have come off the board. If not there, I was praying and hoping that Dallas wouldn't take him at 17. They elected to go CeeDee Lamb. And you could just go down the list. The Dolphins could definitely use some presence off the edge. And you just keep going down the list. And here he is at 20, waiting for the Jaguars to select. And this is overkill for them as well. But they're not dumb. The Jaguars get it. And I talk about teams being willing to go out and get guys and understand that it takes two. All right. What's better than one? Two. And that's across the league at multiple positions. What's better than one starting tackle? Two starting tackles. What's better than one good interior defensive lineman? Two. All right. What's better than one great pass rusher? A second one. Tag team back again. And so Jacksonville understands that. They got Yannick Ngakoue. Is he even going to play another snap for the Jacksonville Jaguars? The writing's on the wall there. They understand that he may never play another snap for them. And even if he does play this year, he probably won't be back the year after that. And so, yeah, they drafted Josh Allen last year, and he had a hell of a rookie season. But when they were at their best back in 2017, when they made a run to the AFC Championship, they had rushers coming at you in waves, whether it was off the edge or on the interior, whether it was Dante Fowler Jr., Yannick Ngakoue, or whomever, Calais Campbell. They were coming in waves and they were coming at you. And so the more the merrier coming off the edge. And I think K'Lavon Chaisson, yep, he's raw. Yeah, not a lot of experience. Remember, you're talking about a redshirt sophomore that missed a year at LSU due to a torn ACL. So this is a guy with not a lot of playing experience. I understand that. But I've talked about this before with teams that understand the draft. You're not afraid to take a chance on a guy with a red flag or a checkered past. You know, it's the reason why the Bengals took Joe Mixon. That's why they're one of the best at drafting. It's the reason why the Cowboys took Jalen Smith. It's the reason why the Jaguars took the linebacker out of UCLA. All right, it's why they take the risk on these players, because there's high upside. And look what these players have done for them. Whether you're talking about Miles Jack in Jacksonville, or you're talking about Jalen Smith in Dallas, or Joe Mixon and the payoff that he's provided in Cincinnati. That's why those teams understand and get it. And they get it here with K'Lavon Chaisson. Yeah, he's raw. Yeah, he hasn't played a bunch of college football, but the upside is through the roof. And I think he's going to be a big-time pass rusher. He's explosive, he's dynamic, and he's also comfortable out in space. He can drop into coverage. There's so much you can do with the K'Lavon Chaisson. I really like this selection for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You get to number 21, and this was my biggest mistake of the first round, and it's the Philadelphia Eagles selecting wide receiver Jalen Reagor out of TCU. Now, I may ultimately be proven wrong here, but they should have taken the guy that ended up going the very next pick, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But Jalen Reagor, to me, wasn't a first-round pick, first and foremost. And, you know, I've always said this, and this is my mantra, this is my motto, and I'll continue to bang this. Get your guy when you feel the need to get your guy. And obviously, the Eagles felt the need to pull the trigger on Jalen Reagor here. So I'm not going to kill them for that. Here's my problem with the selection of Jalen Reagor. 6 receivers went in the first round. He wasn't supposed to be one of them. He wasn't one of the top 6 wide receivers in this draft class. Now, again, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but if you just moved on from Nelson Agholor, why would you then want to draft Nelson Agholor 2.0? That's the rationale that just really makes it hard for me to stomach and digest this selection. Is you're talking about a guy with a ton of concentration drops on tape. And I get the rationale that the Eagles had. Look, we had a bunch of injuries. We didn't have enough speed. Shelton Gibson didn't turn out to be what we thought he was going to be. Deshaun Jackson got injured. We didn't get enough of him last year. And we were just down to the bare essentials at receiver last year. We didn't have any speed. And in case Deshaun Jackson decides to get hurt again, we'll have insurance for that. We'll have a guy that can stretch the football field vertically. I understand that. There were other guys He wasn't the only guy that could stretch the football field vertically. There were other guys that I think were much better than him, like a Brandon Ayuk, for example. If you were looking for that kind of guy that you think can play out wide, to me, Jalen Reagor looked like more of a slot receiver. But again, elite receivers in this league can play everywhere. And I think that's part of the thought process in not taking Justin Jefferson is that, hey, he was primarily a slot at LSU. We don't want just a slot receiver. We want a guy that can play out wide. Well, guess what? Jalen Reagor looks like a slot to me. He can play out wide, and he's not the biggest guy. You don't have to be 6'3" to be a beast in this league, okay? You don't have to look like Nuke Hopkins or Michael Thomas or Julio to play in this league and be an elite wide receiver. Antonio Brown was 5'11", all right, and he gets it done out wide. T.Y. Hilton, not a big guy. He gets it done outside. I understand that concept, but Jalen Reagor doesn't look the part to me. And so I just felt like the Eagles overthought this process. All right, the guy that you needed to take was sitting there for you to take, and you passed him up. And so I got a bet with my man Alex out there. Shout out to my man Alex, who's an Eagles fan, that talked about Jalen Reagor and how he's going to be the most prolific rookie wide receiver of all of the guys taken in the first round. He's going to have the most receiving yards. When the dust settles and the smoke clears in 2020, Jalen Reagor will be your wide receiving leader in terms of yards. Vehemently disagree with that. And why do I disagree with that? Because the guy that was taken 22nd in this draft by the Minnesota Vikings, wide receiver Justin Jefferson from the national champion LSU Tigers, is the guy that's going to do that. Let's talk about Justin Jefferson. Perfect segue. He's my favorite receiver in the first round that went off the board because he's a volume guy. Do you see how many catches he had last year? Like 115 catches or something crazy like that for the LSU Tigers last year. And, you know, the knock on him, he's just a slot receiver. Who gives a shit? I want guys that produce at a high level. I don't give a shit where you do it. Out wide, in the slot, both, neither. Who cares? Now just give me a guy that can get it done. And this is a guy that can get it done. And he's replacing a 1,000-yard receiver, but he's got a 1,000-yard receiver opposite of him, which means unlike a guy like Jalen Reagor, unlike a guy like Henry Ruggs, or even, and probably to a lesser extent and degree, CeeDee Lamb or a Jerry Jeudy, who do have other targets to get the football to, he's going to get a bunch of throws his way to compensate for the loss of a Stephon Diggs. If Kirk Cousins establishes a rapport early and often with Justin Jefferson, this guy could put up an 84 catch, 1,113 yards, 6 touchdown campaign in his rookie season. He's that kind of talent. And just listen to this. And I just want you to understand this. I talked about Jamar Chase, and I don't like talking about minors very often, all right? But Jamar Chase got a lot of the headlines, and rightfully so. He's a man, okay, is Jamar Chase. However, the guy that when the game was on the line or when they needed a big conversion, go watch that Alabama game, huge 3rd and 6 in that ball game. They needed it because Alabama had run off 14 straight and were making a hard charge after LSU jumped out to the 20-point lead at halftime, 33-13. Who did they go to in that critical situation? Who did Joe Burrow on most critical situations go to when they had to have it? It wasn't Jamar Chase. It wasn't Marshall. It was Justin Jefferson. You don't end up with 112 or 115 grabs or whatever that astronomical number was without being the guy. He's a stud. He's a good route runner. He's got soft hands. He catches everything. He understands the receiver position. And look, people complain about his speed. And I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't necessarily see the combine time speed that he ran on tape. He ran like a 4.42. I didn't necessarily always see that on tape. He's plenty fast. Trust me. Go ask the Texas Longhorns at the end of that ball game when they needed a stop. And he was streaking down the sidelines, putting that one away. Look, the guy can run. He can catch it. He can do everything. The Eagles should have selected Justin Jefferson. They didn't. They'll regret it. But the Vikings, they couldn't wait. They ran and sprinted up to the table. Well, they called it in very quickly. They were one of the fastest picks of the night on draft night when Justin Jefferson was still on the board. There was nothing to think about. They got themselves a steal. He should have been gone And I love this selection, as you can tell, for the Minnesota Vikings. So we'll stop there in terms of talking wide receivers or just talking about the draft in general. We'll pick up where we left off tomorrow when we'll finish up the first round, picks 23 through 32 to wrap up the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft. Now, let's proceed to garbage time. So, I want to talk about Tua Tagovailoa. He's apparently ready in Miami for the Dolphins. He's been medically cleared, has been given a clean bill of health, and I'm interested as to what you think the Dolphins should do. Because much like the situation in Los Angeles with Justin Herbert, never, ever trust a man with two first names, who's going to sit behind Tyrod Taylor. They've got a wily veteran that's ready to go in and help them win. Chargers are in a much different place, however, as they're ready to win right now, and they think they can do that, and Tyrod Taylor can steady the ship. The Dolphins are in the same position I feel like the Washington football team was in last year, or the Denver Broncos potentially were in even last season, where not so much the Broncos, I take that back, more so the Washington football team with Dwayne Haskins in 2019, where they weren't going to win anything of note. And even though Jay Gruden was on his deathbed as an NFL head coach and he was a lame duck coach and needed to win in order to save his job, you weren't going to do it with Case Keenum. You weren't going to do it with Colt McCoy. So why not let the young fella go out and play in Dwayne Haskins? They didn't do that. He had to wait until the latter half of the season before he got to start. Kind of stunted his growth a bit, but that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is, do you take the Los Angeles Chargers approach that they're going to have with Justin Herbert? Or do you take the Cincinnati Bengals approach that they're going to have with Joe Burrow, which they're just going to throw him in week one and never look back and say, hey, Joe, go get him and get your feet wet. Figure out the nuances of the NFL. Yeah, it's going to come with some growing pains and some lumps and bumps along the way, but you're going to be better off because of it. Do you go with that model? Or do you go with the Chargers model? You got a veteran here if you're the Dolphins in Ryan Fitzpatrick, a.k.a. Fitty Fitty. Look, you're not going to win a damn thing with Fitty Fitty at quarterback. He's going to give you a chance every single week, but you're not going to win anything of note. And so if you're the Dolphins, and they've got a coaching staff, they've got a GM, all kind of tied together that aren't going anywhere. They've got a chance to build this thing the right way. So there's no hurry here. So you could make a case for both sides. If there's no hurry, put Tua in, let him take his lumps so that you can kind of expedite the process. Or you can say, look, I got a team full of guys that want to win and want to win now. And Ryan Fitzpatrick gives us the best opportunity to do that. So let him play and let the young fella continue to mend, learn. And then when the opportunity comes, we'll put him in. I don't know if that's the best route to go. If Tua's healthy and he's been cleared medically, and this is where preseason, not having preseason comes into play, and it really hurts a team like the Dolphins, because I think back to 2012 with the Seattle Seahawks and Russell Wilson. Remember back in 2012, they had signed Matt Flynn that offseason to come in, gave him a bunch of money to be their starting quarterback, wrestled him away from Green Bay, and they drafted Russell Wilson in the third round that year. And they thought, he was an afterthought. Maybe he's the quarterback of the future, but he'll be a backup in the meantime behind Flynn. And Russell Wilson came in day one, showed the leadership qualities that they were looking for. He wowed them in everything that he did. And then he went into the preseason and tore it to shreds. And at that point, they said, okay, this is our quarterback, not of the future, but of right now. And they haven't looked back since. 2 Super Bowl appearances later, 1 win later. They've got arguably the best quarterback in all of football, probably behind Patrick Mahomes at this point. So you could look at that model and say, that's what the preseason can provide for you. Maybe a little bit of clarity. Maybe you throw Tua in the preseason and he struggles a bit and you realize he's not ready yet. Or maybe you throw Tua in there in the preseason and he lights it up and you say, hey, this guy's ready to go right now. Let's throw him out there and see what he's got. But you don't have the benefit of a preseason this year. And that also kind of factors into my decision-making process. I still would go with Tua. What do you think? What should the Dolphins do if he's really healthy? If there are no physical limitations, there are no setbacks or no potential for setbacks, and he's okay, should the Dolphins pull the trigger on Tua Tagovailoa right away, week one, right out of the gate? Or should they allow Fitty Fitty to have the reins initially and allow Tua to be brought along a little bit slower? What do you think the Dolphins should do? And I want to wrap this show up by talking about Jadeveon Clowney. Why the hell is he still available anyway? Now, I get it. COVID-19 had a lot to do with him not being signed initially during free agency, during that first wave, or hell, even the second wave. But now we're at the point where I don't think, he's going to get a long-term deal. And I think he understands. Probably not going to get a long-term deal at this point. This feels Bryce Harper-ish. Remember, he signed like 2 weeks before spring training was to commence. 2 years ago or whatever it was, he signed with the Phillies. It took him a long time to sign a deal. And, look, Jadeveon Clowney is a guy that I know a lot of people like to point to the numbers with Jadeveon Clowney. Oh, he's not a high sack guy and he can't pay him all this money. If you are just going off of sacks with Jadeveon Clowney, you're not watching Clowney, because what he provides as a havoc wreaker and a disruptor far exceeds the sack total on the stat sheet. This is a guy that disrupts the game in the run game, blows things up. He's a guy that can get after the quarterback. We saw him alter the whole direction and the outcome of a playoff game last year by taking Carson Wentz out. Now, dirty hit or not, I don't think it was a dirty hit, but a lot of people seem to think that it was. Whether it was or not, they lose that game if Carson Wentz is healthy. He took him out of that game, and I'm not saying that's what you're supposed to do, but he did. He's a difference maker. He can get to the quarterback. He can disrupt the offense's flow and rhythm. He blows plays up. He's consistently in the backfield. Look at that Monday night game against the 49ers when they were undefeated and didn't think they could be stopped. Jadeveon Clowney was a one-man wrecking crew that night, and single-handedly, from a defensive standpoint, helped the Seahawks go on the road and defeat the San Francisco 49ers. He was outstanding. That's what you can get if he's healthy, and I get it. You didn't know if he was healthy during COVID, and you didn't have a chance to get him into your facility, have your medical staff test him out to make sure that he was worthy of the money, and maybe he was asking for too much. That's a possibility, I don't know. At the end of the day, why haven't the Titans or the Jets or the Giants or the Seahawks or somebody stepped up to the plate and signed this man? He's too good of a football player to still be available. Look, it may ultimately be a one-year deal. Figure it out. Jadeveon Clowney should be in someone's camp right now. He's too good of a football player. What are we doing here, folks? Somebody sign this man up ASAP. And that's going to do it for me, your man, Louie Tee, and the 79th installment of the Louie Tee Network Podcast. I thank you guys for joining me. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not, I repeat, not the best NFL coverage it could be. We'll do this again tomorrow. And again, remember, take care of yourself. Take care of your loved ones. Make sure you're doing everything you can to keep yourself safe and out of harm's way. This thing is serious, and I want to make sure that you guys keep yourselves safe. With that being said, we'll reconvene at a later date and time. Look forward to chopping it up with you guys again here on the pod tomorrow. We'll have a bevy of new topics to talk about, including wrapping up the first round of the 2020 NFL Draft. Until then, I'm your man, Louie Tee, signing off. See you guys later. Have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.